GhastlyGarlic Episode 11, The Devourer. Prologue. In the heart of Thailand, where the dense jungles stretch endlessly and the air is thick with the scent of frangipani, there lies a tale older than time itself. This tale is whispered among villagers, passed down from elders whose eyes have seen too much. It is a story that clings to the shadows, a story of an entity known as Phi-Pop. Phi-Pop, a malevolent spirit of unspeakable hunger and malice, is a ghost that feeds not just on flesh, but on the very essence of humanity. The spirit is said to have once been a beautiful woman, a shaman who dabbled too deeply in the dark arts. Her greed for power led her to the forbidden rituals of necromancy, seeking immortality and dominance over death itself. But as with all who seek to cheat the natural order, she paid a terrible price. Her soul, corrupted by the dark forces she sought to control, was condemned to wander eternally, neither alive nor dead, but forever ravenous. The legend tells of her transformation. On the night of a blood moon, she performed the final ritual. Chanting incantations in an ancient tongue, she felt the power surge through her veins. But as she reached the climax of her spell, the forces she had invoked turned against her. Her body convulsed, twisted, and contorted into an abomination. Her flesh rotted away, leaving her a spectral entity driven by an insatiable hunger for human entrails. Thus, Phi-Pop was born. Phi-Pop prowls the night, seeking the weak, the greedy, and the unfaithful. Her presence is heralded by a chill in the air and the sound of rustling leaves, even when the wind is still. Those who are marked by her are doomed to a fate worse than death. She possesses their bodies, feasting on their enemies while leaving their shells alive, aware, and in unbearable agony. The possessed become hollow vessels, mere puppets controlled by her insidious will. The villagers know the signs of her approach. Cattle found mutilated, their bellies ripped open, and entrails missing. Crops wilting under an invisible curse. And worst of all, the sickening screams of those unfortunate enough to fall under her spell, echoing through the night until they are abruptly silenced. But the story of Phi-Pop is not just one of terror and despair. It is also a tale of greed and betrayal, a dark reflection of human nature. For Phi-Pop is drawn to those who mirror the greed that condemned her. Wealth, power, and betrayal are her beacons, guiding her to new victims. Deep in the heart of the jungle, in a forgotten village, an ancient shrine stands in ruin, covered in vines and moss. It is here that the spirit of Phi-Pop is said to have first arisen. The shrine, once a place of worship, is now a place of fear. No one dares to go near it, for it is believed that her spirit still lingers, bound to the site of her transformation. On nights when the moon is full and the air is thick with the promise of rain, the villagers gather around their fires, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. They speak of Phi-Pop in hushed tones, their voices trembling with fear. They tell stories of loved ones lost, of neighbors turned into monstrous husks. They know that to speak her name too loudly is to invite her wrath. Yet, despite the fear and the horror, there are always those who seek her out, driven by their own greed and ambition. They believe they can harness her power, that they can control the uncontrollable, but they are always wrong. Phi-Pop does not grant power, she takes it. She consumes those who are foolish enough to summon her, adding their souls to her collection. As the prologue draws to a close, we are left with a sense of foreboding. The tale of Phi-Pop is not just a story of the past, it is a warning. For in the modern world, where greed and betrayal are as rampant as ever, Phi-Pop's hunger has only grown stronger. She waits in the shadows, her insidious presence lurking just out of sight, ready to claim those who fall prey to their darkest desires. In the dim light of dawn, as the jungle awakens and the first rays of sunlight pierce through the canopy, the villagers offer their prayers. They pray for protection, for deliverance from the malevolent spirit that haunts their nights. But deep down, they know that as long as there is greed and betrayal, Phi-Pop will never be truly vanquished. She is eternal, a dark shadow that lingers in the corners of their minds, a constant reminder of the price of unchecked ambition. And so, the legend of Phi-Pop lives on, a dark and eerie tale that continues to haunt the dreams of those who dare to listen. But does the legend reflect overall truth? Chapter 1. Nightmares and Reality. The night was unnaturally still. In the modest house nestled on the outskirts of Bangkok, Somchai tossed and turned in his bed, his brow glistening with a cold sweat. Outside, the cicadas had fallen silent, as if they too feared the terrors lurking in the shadows. The moonlight cast an eerie glow through the thin curtains, illuminating the room in a ghostly light. Somchai's breathing was ragged, his face contorted in fear, as he fell deeper into the clutches of a nightmare that had plagued him for weeks. In his dream, Somchai found himself in a dense, suffocating jungle. The air was thick with humidity, and the scent of decay hung heavy around him. The trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to ensnare him. He stumbled forward, his heart pounding in his chest, every step a struggle against the oppressive weight of the air. His skin prickled with the sensation of unseen eyes watching him from the darkness. He knew he was not alone. The presence was there, lurking just beyond his sight, whispering sinister promises of pain and despair. Somchai's legs felt like lead as he trudged through the undergrowth, the ground beneath him squelching with a sickening, wet sound. He could feel the eyes on him, cold and malevolent, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Ahead, a faint light flickered. Drawn to it like a moth to a flame, Somchai pushed through the thick foliage. As he neared the source of the light, he saw an ancient shrine, crumbling and overgrown with vines. It was the same shrine from the old stories his grandmother used to tell him when he was a child, stories of dark spirits and vengeful ghosts. The light emanated from within the shrine, casting long and dancing shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Compelled by an unseen force, Somchai stepped closer. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, drowning out all other sounds. He could feel the presence growing stronger, its hunger palpable in the air. As he reached the entrance of the shrine, the light flickered and died, plunging him into darkness. Panic surged through him, and he turned to flee, but his legs would not obey. He was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. From the darkness, a shape emerged. It was a woman, or at least something that had once been a woman. Her hair was long and matted, her skin pallid and decayed. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and her mouth twisted into a grotesque grin, revealing rows of sharp, blood-stained teeth. Somchai tried to scream, but no sound came out. The woman's hand reached out to him, her fingers elongating into razor-sharp claws. As her hand touched his chest, a searing pain shot through his body. He looked down in horror to see her claws sinking into his flesh, ripping through muscle and bone with terrifying ease. His vision blurred, the world around him spinning as the pain overwhelmed his senses. The woman's laughter echoed in his ears, a haunting, chilling sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Somchai's eyes snapped open and he bolted upright in bed, gasping for breath. His heart raced, and his body was drenched in sweat. For a moment he was disoriented, the line between dream and reality blurred. He could still feel the phantom pain in his chest, the memory of those claws tearing into him. The room was silent, save for his ragged breathing and the distant hum of the city. His wife, Namphon, stirred beside him, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. "Sonchai, are you okay?" she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. Sonchai nodded, swallowing hard to dislodge the lump in his throat. "Just a nightmare," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and buried his face in his hands, trying to shake off the lingering terror. Namphon sat up, her concern evident in her eyes. "Another one? This is the third time this week. You need to see a doctor, Sonchai." "This isn't normal." He nodded again, knowing she was right. The nightmares had started a few weeks ago, seemingly out of nowhere. At first, he had dismissed them as stress from work, but they had grown aggressively worse, each one more vivid and horrifying than the last. He felt like he was losing his grip on reality, the line between dream and wakefulness becoming increasingly thin. "I'll make an appointment," he promised, though the thought of discussing his nightmares with a stranger filled him with dread. Namphon gave his hand a reassuring squeeze before lying back down. Sonchai remained seated on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. His mind raced with fragments of the nightmare, the woman's haunting laughter echoing in his ears. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if something dark and sinister was lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. Unable to shake the feeling, he rose from the bed and walked to the kitchen. The cool tiles beneath his feet provided a small measure of comfort. He opened the fridge, hoping a glass of water would help calm his nerves. As he reached for the pitcher, his eyes fell on a package of raw meat, neatly wrapped in plastic. A sudden, inexplicable hunger gnawed at his stomach, a craving that felt alien and unnatural. Without thinking, he tore open the package and brought a piece of the raw meat to his mouth. The taste was metallic and slightly gamey, but he didn't care. He devoured it hungrily, the blood smearing his lips and chin. He didn't stop until the package was empty, the gnawing hunger finally sated. Sonchai stood there, the empty package in his hands, feeling a wave of revulsion wash over him. What had he just done? He stumbled to the sink, rinsing his mouth and scrubbing his hands with a desperation that bordered on panic. The taste of the raw meat lingered, a grim reminder of his inexplicable act. As he stood there, the cool water running over his hands, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the kitchen window. For a brief moment, he saw not his own face, but the face of the woman from his nightmares, her eyes glowing with that unnatural light. He blinked, and the image was gone, replaced by his own pale, haunted visage. He turned off the tap and leaned heavily against the counter, his mind a whirl of confusion and fear. He knew he couldn't go on like this. The nightmares were consuming him, driving him to the brink of madness. He needed help, and he needed it soon. With a heavy heart, he resolved to call the doctor first thing in the morning. As he made his way back to bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something dark and sinister was watching him, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the moment to strike. And deep down, he knew that the nightmares were only the beginning of a much darker journey that lay ahead. Chapter 2. Seeking Help. Morning light filtered softly through the curtains, casting gentle shadows across the room. Namphon had already left for work, her quiet departure leaving the house in an eerie silence. Sonchai sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee. The taste of raw meat still lingered in his mouth, a grim reminder of the night before. The unsettling events of the previous night replayed in his mind like a broken record, each iteration more disturbing than the last. He knew he couldn't ignore the nightmares any longer. They were consuming him, eating away at his sanity. With a deep sigh, he picked up his phone and dialed the number of the clinic Namphon had mentioned. His fingers trembled slightly as he listened to the ringing on the other end. "Hello, this is the Bangkok Wellness Clinic. How may I assist you?" The receptionist's voice was cheerful, a stark contrast to Somshay's somber mood. "I'd like to make an appointment," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I've been having troubling nightmares." "Of course, sir. We have an opening with Dr. Araya at 2 p.m. today. Will that work for you?" "Yes, that's perfect. Thank you." After hanging up, Somchai felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. He didn't know what to expect, but he hoped that Dr. Araya could help him make sense of the horrors that plagued his nights. Later that day, Somchai found himself sitting in the waiting room of the Bangkok Wellness Clinic. The air was cool, and the soft hum of the air conditioner did little to soothe his nerves. He glanced around, noticing the serene paintings on the walls and the potted plants strategically placed to create a calming atmosphere. But nothing can calm the storm raging inside him. "Mr. Somchai, Dr. Araya will see you now," the receptionist called out, her smile warm and inviting. Somchai stood, smoothing down his shirt as he made his way to the door. As he stepped into Dr. Araya's office, he was struck by the contrast between the clinical setting and the person who greeted him. Dr. Araya was stunningly beautiful, with long raven black hair cascading down her back and eyes that seemed to hold a depth of understanding beyond her years. She stood up to greet him, her smile genuine and warm. "Mr. Somchai, it's a pleasure to meet you. Please, have a seat," she said, gesturing to the comfortable chair opposite her desk. "Thank you, Dr. Araya," he replied, his voice faltering slightly under her gaze. "Please, call me Araya," she said, sitting down and folding her hands on the desk. "Now, how can I help you?" Somchai took a deep breath, the words tumbling out in a rush. He told her about the nightmares, the sleepwalking, and the terrifying episode with the raw meat. Araya listened intently, her expression one of deep concern and empathy. "These nightmares sound very distressing, Somchai," she said softly. "Have you experienced anything traumatic recently that might have triggered them?" He shook his head. "No, nothing that I can think of. My life has been normal, routine even." "That's what makes this so unsettling." Araya nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes our subconscious mind can bring up fears and anxieties that we aren't even aware of. It can be very challenging to face these things, but that's why I'm here. We'll work through this together." Over the next few sessions, Somchai found himself opening up more to Araya. Her calm demeanor and insightful questions helped him to explore the depths of his nightmares and the emotions tied to them. But there was something else, something he hadn't anticipated. With each session, he felt an undeniable attraction growing between them. Her beauty, her intelligence, and her compassion drew him in like a moth to a flame. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Araya suggested they take a break and go for a walk. The clinic was located near a small park, and the setting sun bathed everything in a warm golden light. As they walked, they talked about lighter subjects, books, movies, and their favorite foods. Somchai felt a sense of normalcy returning, a reprieve from the darkness that haunted his nights. "Why?" He began hesitantly. "I want to thank you for everything. I don't know what I'd do without your help." She smiled, a blush coloring her cheeks. "I'm glad I can help, Somchai. You're a very strong person, and I believe you can overcome this." As they continued walking, their hands brushed against each other, sending a jolt of electricity through Somchai. He glanced at Araya, and she met his gaze, her eyes sparkling with something unspoken. And in that moment, the world seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them standing in the soft glow of the evening. "Songchai," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "there's something I needed to tell you." His heart raced as he waited for her to continue. "I feel a connection with you, something beyond the professional relationship we're supposed to have. I know it's not right, but I can't deny it any longer." Songchai's breath caught in his throat. He had felt it too, this undeniable pull towards her. "Araya, I feel the same way. But what do we do? This is complicated." She nodded, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I know. But maybe, just for tonight, we can forget about the rules and the complications. Just for tonight we can be ourselves." Without another word, they moved closer, the distance between them vanishing. Their lips met in a tender, hesitant kiss, the world around them fading into nothingness. In that moment, all the fears and nightmares seemed distant and unreal, replaced by the warmth of Araya's embrace. That night marked the beginning of their secret affair. They continued their sessions at the clinic, maintaining a facade of professionalism, but behind closed doors their passion for each other grew. They found solace in each other's arms, a refuge from the horrors that plagued Songchai's nights. But as their relationship deepened, so did the complexity of their situation. Songchai felt a constant tug of guilt, knowing he was betraying Namphon. Yet, he couldn't bring himself to end his relationship with Araya. She was his anchor, his light in the darkness, and for Araya, Songchai was more than just a patient. He was someone who understood her in ways no one else did. Their love was intense, consuming, and fraught with danger. They met in secret, stealing moments whenever they could. Songchai's nightmares persisted, but with Araya by his side, he felt a glimmer of hope, of a belief that he could overcome the darkness. One evening, as they lay entwined in each other's arms, Araya looked into Songchai's eyes, her expression serious. "Songchai, I want to help you, truly help you. But we need to confront the root of these nightmares. I believe there's something deeper, something from your past that we haven't uncovered yet." He nodded, trusting her completely. "I'm willing to try anything, Araya. I just want this to end." She smiled, her hand gently caressing his cheek. "We'll get through this together. I promise." As they held each other, the future seemed uncertain, but their bond grew stronger with each passing day. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges and moral dilemmas, but their love gave them the strength to face whatever came their way. Little did they know, the darkness that haunted Songchai's nights was not just a figment of his imagination. It was a force beyond their understanding, a malevolent presence that thrived on fear and despair. And as they delved deeper into the mystery, they would uncover secrets that would test their love and their sanity. For now, they had each other, a beacon of light in the encroaching darkness. But the true nature of Songchai's nightmares was yet to be revealed, and the journey to uncover the truth would take them to places they could never have imagined. As they lay together, the night outside grew darker, and the unseen presence watched, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Chapter 3. The Affair. The affair between Songchai and Araya began with a magnetic pull, a force neither could resist. It started innocently enough, with lingering glances and touches that lasted a moment too long. Their connection was undeniable, growing stronger with each session, until the boundaries between patient and psychologist blurred into something far more intimate. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Songchai lingered in Araya's office. The air between them was thick with unspoken desire. Araya had just finished making notes on his progress, her pen tapping thoughtfully against her notepad. She looked up, catching his eye, and for a moment they were both suspended in time, teetering on the edge of a decision that would change everything. "Somchai," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "There's something I need to tell you." He took a step closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "What is it, Araya?" She hesitated, bite bone on lip. "I can't keep pretending that I don't feel something for you. It's not professional, I know, but I can't help it. You mean more to me than just a patient." Somchai's breath caught in his throat. "I feel the same way, Araya. I know it's wrong, but I can't stop thinking of you." Without another word, they closed the distance between them. Somchai's hand cupped Araya's cheek as their lips met in a passionate, desperate kiss. It was as if all the longing and tension of the past weeks had finally found release. Their hands roamed each other's bodies, exploring, discovering, igniting a fire that had been smouldering just beneath the surface. Araya pulled back slightly, her eyes dark with desire. "We shouldn't be doing this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know," Somchai replied, his voice rough with need. "But I don't care." In the dim light of her office, they gave in to their passion. Clothes were hastily discarded, their bodies pressing together with an urgency that spoke of weeks of pent-up desire. Somchai's hands roamed over Araya's curves, memorizing every inch of her as if afraid this moment might be their last. They moved to the small couch in the corner of the office, their bodies tangling in a frenzy of limbs and whispered promises. Araya's fingers dug into Somchai's back as he kissed a trail down her neck, her soft moans spurring him on. The world outside ceased to exist. All that mattered was the heat and the need between them. Later, as they lay entwined on the couch, their breathing heavy and their bodies slick with sweat, reality began to seep back in. The enormity of what they had done loomed over them, but neither spoke of it. Instead, they held each other, savoring the fleeting moment of peace and connection. As the weeks passed, their affair continued in secret. They stole moments together whenever they could, meeting in hidden corners and deserted hallways. Each encounter was a mix of passion and guilt, the thrill of the forbidden heightening their desire for each other. But the secrecy took its toll. Somchai's guilt weighed heavily on him, knowing he was betraying Namphon. Araya, too, struggled with her conscience, aware that she was crossing a line and that could jeopardize her career and reputation. Yet neither could bring themselves to end the affair. They were addicted to each other, drawn together by a force stronger than reason or morality. One evening, as they lay in a cheap motel room tangled in the sheets, Somchai turned to Araya, his expression troubled. "We can't keep doing this, Araya. It's going to destroy us both." "I know," she replied, her voice filled with anguish. "But I can't let you go. You're the only thing that makes sense in all of this madness." Somchai sighed, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I love you, Araya, but this isn't right. We have to find a way out." Before Somchai could say more, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. He reached for it, his heart sinking as he saw Namphon's name on the screen. Guilt surged through him as he answered the call. "Somchai, where are you?" Namphon's voice was filled with concern. "It's late, and I was worried. I'm out with a friend," Somchai lied, his stomach twisting with shame. "I'll be home soon." As he hung up, he met Araya's gaze, the weight of their deception pressing down on him. "This has to end," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't keep lying to her." Araya nodded, her expression resigned. "I know. We have to face the consequences of our actions." The next day, Somchai resolved to end the affair. But when he arrived at the clinic, he found himself drawn to Araya once again. She looked up from her desk as he entered, her eyes lighting up with a mixture of joy and sorrow. "Somchai," she began, standing up and walking around her desk to meet him. "We need to talk." He nodded, his heart heavy. "I know. We can't keep doing this, Raya. It's not fair to anyone." "I agree," she said, taking his hand in hers. "But before we end this, I want to help you one last time. I think I've found a way to confront your nightmares." Somchai's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Araya took a deep breath. "There's a place, a temple outside the city, where people go to seek spiritual guidance and healing. I think it might help you find some answers." He hesitated, torn between the need to end their affair and the hope of finding a solution to his nightmares. "Will you come with me?" "Yes," she replied, her grip on his hand tightening. "I'll be there with you every step of the way." The next weekend, they set out for the temple. The drive was long and silent, the tension between them palpable. Somchai's mind was a whirl of conflicting emotions, his love for Araya warring with his guilt over betraying Namphon. When they arrived, the temple was a serene haven nestled in the lush greenery of the countryside. Monks in saffron robes moved about, their chants filling the air with a sense of peace. Araya led Somchai to a small, secluded shrine where they knelt in front of a statue of the Buddha. "Close your eyes," Araya instructed softly. "Focus on your breathing and let go of everything else." Somchai did as she said, taking deep, steady breaths. The rhythmic chanting of the monks seemed to lull him into a trance, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of calm. Araya's voice broke through the silence, her words a soothing balm. "Somchai, you need to confront the source of your nightmares. Visualize the darkness, face it head-on." As he followed her guidance, the familiar terror began to creep in. The darkness of his nightmares loomed before him, but this time he didn't run. He stood his ground, Araya's presence giving him the strength to face his fears. Suddenly, the darkness shifted, revealing a shadowy figure. Somchai's heart raced as he recognized the woman from his nightmares, her eyes glowing with malevolent light. But instead of attacking, she simply stood there, watching him. "Who are you?" Somchai whispered, his voice trembling. The figure's eyes softened, and she began to speak, her voice echoing in his mind. "I am a part of you, Somchai, a manifestation of your deepest fears and regrets. You cannot defeat me by running away. You must confront your past and find peace within yourself." As the figure spoke, Somchai felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The realization that his nightmares were tied to his unresolved emotions gave him a sense of clarity. He opened his eyes, finding Araya's concerned gaze upon him. "Did it help?" she asked softly. Somchai nodded, a sense of calm settling over him. "Yes, I think it did." "Thank you, Araya." They left the temple with a newfound sense of purpose. Somchai knew that he needed to face his fears and make amends for his actions, but as they drove back to the city, the reality of their situation began to weigh on him once more. The following week, Somchai made a decision. He could no longer continue the affair with Araya. It was time to face the consequences of his actions and be honest with Namphon. He called Araya, asking to meet it at the clinic one last time. When he arrived, he found her waiting in her office, her expression a mix of anticipation and sadness. "Somchai," she said, standing up to greet him. "What's going on?" He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he had to say. "Araya, I can't keep doing this. I need to be honest with Namphon. This affair, it has to end." Her eyes filled with tears. "I knew this day would come." "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his heart breaking at the sight of her pain. I never meant to hurt you." Araya stepped closer, her hand cupping his cheek. "I know, Somchai, and I love you. We can work this out. Please don't leave me." With one final, lingering kiss, Somchai left the clinic, his heart heavy and unresolved, but he knew what he had to do, even if it meant facing the anger and betrayal of those he cared about. When he arrived home, Namphon was waiting for him, her expression anxious. "Somchai, we need to talk." "I know," he replied, his voice steady. "There's something I need to tell you." As he began to confess his affair with Araya, Namphon's eyes filled with tears. Her anger was palpable, but beneath it was a deep sadness. "How could you do this to us, Somchai? How could you betray me like this? I'm so sorry." "Namphon," he said, his voice breaking, "I never wanted to hurt you. I was lost, and I made a terrible mistake." Namphon's tears flowed freely as she struggled to contain her emotions. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Somchai, but I need time to think." He nodded, his own tears falling. "I understand. I'll give you all the time you need." As he left their home, Somchai felt a sense of finality. The affair with Araya had brought both passion and pain, and now it was time to face the consequences. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he was determined to find a way to heal the wounds he had caused. For now, he would have to confront his past and seek forgiveness, both from those he had hurt and from himself. And as the darkness of his nightmares continued to loom, he knew that the true battle was only just beginning. Chapter 4, A Dangerous Light. Somchai paced the length of his living room, the walls closing in on him as his mind raced. The ultimatum Namphon had given him weighed heavily on his shoulders, a constant reminder of the thin ice he was walking on. He had to end things with Araya, and it had to be done today. The thought twisted at his insides, a knot of anxiety and regret. He picked up his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed Araya's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times before she answered, her voice a soothing balm that only deepened his sense of impending loss. "Somchai, is everything okay?" Araya's voice was soft, concerned. "Araya, we need to talk," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Can you meet me at the cafe near the clinic in an hour?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and he could almost hear her heart sinking. "All right, I'll see you there," she replied, her voice tinged with unease. Somchai ended the call and stared at his reflection in the window, the morning light casting harsh lines on his face. He knew this was necessary, but that didn't make it any easier. The cafe was nearly empty when Somchai arrived. He found a secluded corner and sat down, his mind a maelstrom of thoughts. Minutes felt like hours until he saw Araya walk in, her eyes scanning the room before landing on him. She approached, her face a mask of apprehension. "Somchai, what's going on?" she asked, sitting down across from him. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "Araya, I have to end this. Namphon found out about us, and she's given me an ultimatum. If I don't break things off with you, she'll leave me and tell everyone about our affair. I can't risk losing everything." Araya's face went pale, and she reached out to grasp his hand. "Somchai, please don't do this. We can find a way to make it work. I can't lose you." "I'm sorry, Araya," he said, pulling his hand away, "but I have to choose my family. I have to choose Namphon." Desperation flashed in her eyes, and she leaned closer. "What if I told you I was pregnant, Somchai? What then?" The world seemed to stop, her words hanging in the air like a death knell. "What?" he whispered, his mind reeling. "Are you saying you're pregnant?" She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. Yes, Somchai. I found out a few days ago. I didn't know how to tell you, but I can't do this alone. I need you. Somchai's heart pounded in his chest, his thoughts a chaotic swirl of fear and confusion. Araya, this changes everything. I can't just walk away from our child. I know, she said, her voice trembling. But we can figure this out together. Please, Somchai, don't leave me. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. I need to think, he said, standing up abruptly. I need some time to process this. Araya nodded, tears streaming down her face. Take all the time you need, Somchai. Just please, don't abandon me. As he left the cafe, Somchai felt as though the ground was shifting beneath his feet. The drive home was a blur, his thoughts consumed by the revelation. When he walked through the door, Namphon was waiting for him, her eyes red from crying. Did you do it? She asked, her voice breaking. I tried, he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. But there's something you need to know. Araya. She's pregnant. Namphon's face went white, and she sank into a chair, her eyes wide with shock. What? How could you let this happen? I didn't know, he said, his voice choked with emotion. I found out today. I don't know what to do, Namphon. Her eyes hardened, and she stood up, her hands clenched into fists. You need to demand she get an abortion. This is the only way we can salvage what's left of our marriage. Somchai stared at her, his mind reeling. I can't force her to do that, Namphon. It's her choice. You have to try, she said, her voice fierce. If she refuses, then offer her money, whatever it takes to make this problem go away. The next day, Somchai met Araya at her apartment. She looked hopeful as she opened the door, but that hope quickly faded when she saw the grim expression on his face. Araya, we need to talk, he said, stepping inside. What's wrong, Somchai? She asked, her voice trembling. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he had to say. Namphon wants you to get an abortion. She said it's the only way we can save our marriage. I'm prepared to offer you a substantial amount of money if you agree. Araya's face contorted with shock and betrayal. You want me to kill our child for money? How could you even suggest that? I don't want this either, he said, his voice breaking. But I'm desperate. Araya, I don't know what else to do. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Somchai, I'm not pregnant. I lied because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. But I can't go through with this alone. Somchai stared at her, his mind struggling to comprehend what she was saying. You lied. She nodded, her sobs racking her body. I'm so sorry, Somchai. I just wanted to keep you. But I promise, I'll leave after I help you with your nightmares. I'll make sure you're cured, and then I'll go. The room spun around him as the weight of her confession settled in. Why, Araya? Why would you do this? Because I love you, she said, her voice raw with emotion, and I couldn't let you go. But I realize now that I was wrong. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Somchai sank into a chair, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and betrayal. I don't know if I can trust you, Araya. You've lied to me, manipulated me. I know, she said, kneeling beside him. And I'm so sorry. But please, let me make it right. Let me help you with your nightmares, and then I'll disappear from your life. You have my word. He looked into her tear-streaked face, searching for any hint of deception. Despite everything, a part of him still cared for her, still wanted to believe that she could help him. All right, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. But this is your last chance, Araya. If you betray me again, it's over for good." "I won't," she promised, her eyes filled with determination. "I'll make this right, Somchai. I swear it." As the days turned into weeks, Araya threw herself into finding a solution for Somchai's nightmares. She consulted with experts, researched ancient texts, and even reached out to spiritual healers. Her dedication was unwavering, and slowly Somchai began to see improvements. Despite the progress, the tension between them remained. The lie about the pregnancy had driven a wedge between them that could not be easily removed. Trust, once broken, was difficult to rebuild. One evening, as they sat together reviewing the latest findings, Araya looked at Somchai with a mixture of hope and fear. "I think we're getting close to a breakthrough. There's a traditional Thai ritual that might help. It involves a sacred dagger, one that was lost during World War II. If we can find it, it might be the key to curing your nightmares." Somchai frowned, intrigued, skeptical. "A sacred dagger? How are we supposed to find something that was lost decades ago?" Araya's eyes lit up with determination. "I have a lead. There's a Yakuza family in Japan that might have it. The dagger was stolen from a Thai palace and taken to Japan by a soldier during the war. If we can retrieve it, we might have a chance." The idea seemed far-fetched, but Somchai was willing to try anything to rid himself of the nightmares. "Right, let's do it. But remember, this is your last chance." Araya nodded, her resolve unwavering. "I understand, and I won't let you down, Somchai." The journey to Japan was fraught with tension and uncertainty. Araya's determination to find the dagger drove them forward, even as the spectre of their past mistakes loomed over them. Somchai could only hope that this dangerous quest would bring the closure they both so desperately needed. Chapter 5. The Plan. The days leading up to their departure for Japan were a whirlwind of preparation. Dr. Araya had spent countless hours researching and contacting various sources to confirm the existence of the sacred dagger. Her conviction that this relic held the key to ending Somchai's nightmares was unwavering, and she knew that this journey was their last hope. Somchai, still reeling from the revelations of the past weeks, found himself caught in a tempest of emotions. The betrayal he felt towards Araya was tempered by a flicker of hope that this trip might finally bring an end to his torment. Despite his misgivings, he agreed to accompany her, driven by a desperate need for peace. The day of their departure dawned with an oppressive heat, the Bangkok sun blazing down as they made their way to the airport. Araya was a bundle of nerves, her mind racing with the intricacies of their plan. Somchai, on the other hand, was lost in a haze of uncertainty, his thoughts a jumble of fear and anticipation. The flight to Japan was long and tense. Araya spent most of the journey poring over her notes, making final adjustments to their plan. She had arranged for them to stay in a discreet hotel in the heart of Tokyo, close enough to the Yakuza stronghold, but far enough to avoid undue attention. Somchai watched her with a mix of admiration and apprehension, marveling at her dedication even as he struggled to shake off his doubts. They arrived in Tokyo to a grey, overcast sky. The air was thick with humidity, and the bustling energy of the city seemed to envelop them as they stepped out of the airport. Araya led the way, her confidence a stark contrast to Somchai's palpable anxiety. They navigated the crowded streets, the cacophony of voices and traffic a constant backdrop as they made their way to the hotel. The hotel was a modest establishment tucked away in a quiet side street. Araya had chosen it for its anonymity, a place where they could plan their next move without drawing attention. As they settled into their room, Somchai couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The weight of their mission pressed down on him, and he found himself questioning whether they were truly prepared for what lay ahead. Araya sensed his unease and took his hand, a touch of reassuring anchor in the storm of his thoughts. Somchai, I know this is difficult, but we have to stay focused. This dagger is our only chance to cure your nightmares. We can't afford to lose hope now. He nodded, taking a deep breath. I trust you, Araya. I just hope we're not walking into something we can't handle. Her eyes met his, filled with a determination that gave him a flicker of reassurance. We've come too far to turn back now. We need to stick to the plan. The next morning, they set out to gather information. Araya had arranged a meeting with a local contact, a former journalist named Hiroshi, who had connections within the Yakuza underworld. They met in a small, dimly lit cafe, the air thick with the scent of coffee and cigarettes. Hiroshi was a wiry man with a weathered face, his eyes sharp and calculating as he regarded them. You must be Dr. Araya, he said in fluent English, extending a hand. I've heard a lot about you, and this must be Somchai. Araya shook his hand, her expression resolute. Thank you for meeting with us, Hiroshi. We need your help to locate a very specific artifact, a traditional Thai dagger that was taken during World War II. Hiroshi nodded, his eyes narrowing. I know the dagger you're referring to. It's a valuable piece, currently in the possession of Takeshi family. They're one of the oldest Yakuza clans in Tokyo. Gaining access to it won't be easy. We're willing to do whatever it takes, Araya said, her voice steady. Can you help us make contact with them? Hiroshi leaned back, his gaze thoughtful. The Takeshi are very private, and they don't trust outsiders easily. But there might be a way. The current head of the family, Kenji Takeshi, is known for his particular interests. If you can catch his attention, he might be willing to meet with you. Somchai's stomach churned at the thought of dealing with the Yakuza, but Araya's resolve was unwavering. What kind of interests are we talking about? Hiroshi gave a wry smile. Kenji has a weakness for beautiful women. If you, Araya, can present yourselves, you might be able to secure a meeting. Araya nodded, her mind already working on the details. Thank you, Hiroshi. Hiroshi nodded. But remember that the Takeshi are dangerous. You need to be very careful. As they left the cafe, Somchai couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his gut. The reality of their situation was becoming clearer, and the dangers they faced were all too real. But Araya's determination was a beacon of hope, guiding him through the darkness. Chapter 6. Flashbacks to the past. The city of Bangkok was shrouded in a thick, suffocating darkness, the kind that only comes with the silence of pre-dawn. Somchai tossed and turned in the hotel bed, his mind restless. As he fell into a fitful sleep, the room seemed to fade away, pulling him back through the corridors of time to a distant era marked by violence and upheaval. The year was 1942. The echoes of war reverberated across the globe, reaching even the tranquil corners of the Thai kingdom. The Japanese army, in its relentless march across Asia, had established a firm presence in Thailand. Their occupation brought not only soldiers but also fear and suffering to the people. In a grand, albeit dilapidated palace on the outskirts of Bangkok, a young servant named Lana moved quietly through the shadowy halls. The palace had once been a place of splendor, but now it was a stark contrast to its former glory, serving as a makeshift headquarters for the occupying forces. Lana, with her delicate features and haunted eyes, had once dreamed of a life filled with love and peace. Instead, she found herself caught in the cruel web of war, forced to serve those who had invaded her homeland. Each day was a struggle to survive, her only solace the fleeting moments of peace when she could retreat to the palace gardens. It was in one of these gardens that she first encountered Takeshi, a young Japanese officer with a cold, calculating demeanor. He was part of the elite forces, feared and respected by his peers. Takeshi's eyes were hard and unyielding, reflecting the harshness of the world he had come to dominate. Lana had been tending to the flowers, trying to lose herself in the mundane task, when she felt his gaze upon her. She looked up, her heart pounding in her chest, and met his piercing eyes. Takeshi approached her with a predatory grace, a smirk playing on his lips. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice like steel. "Lana," she stammered, her eyes dropping to the ground. Takeshi tilted her chin up with a rough hand, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You will serve me now, Lana." From that moment, Lana's life became a nightmare. Takeshi took what he wanted with ruthless efficiency, his cruelty knowing no bounds. He visited her in the dead of night, his presence a shadow that smothered any flicker of hope she might have had. The palace, once her sanctuary, became a prison from which there was no escape. One night, after a particularly brutal encounter, Takeshi sat in Lana's quarters, his eyes gleaming with a sinister light. "You'll do something for me, Lana," he said, his voice dripping with menace. Lana, bruised and broken, looked up at him, her spirit shattered but her will to survive still flickering. "What do you want from me?" She whispered. "There is a dagger," Takeshi began, his eyes narrowing. "A traditional Thai dagger said to possess great power. It is hidden somewhere in this palace. You will find it for me." Lana's heart sank. The dagger he spoke of was a sacred artifact, entrusted to the royal family for generations. She had heard whispers of its power, tales of its ability to protect and destroy. Stealing it would be a betrayal of everything she held dear. But refusing Takeshi was not an option. Days turned into nights as Lana searched the palace, her every movement watched by Takeshi's men. The weight of her task grew heavier with each passing moment, the fear of what would happen if she failed gnawing at her soul. Finally, in a forgotten chamber deep within the palace, she found the dagger. It was a thing of beauty and menace, its blade glinting with an otherworldly light. The hilt was intricately carved, depicting scenes of warriors and mythical creatures locked in eternal combat. Lana could feel its power thrumming through the air, a dark promise of what was to come. With trembling hands, she brought the dagger to Takeshi. His eyes gleamed with triumph as he took it from her, the cold metal glinting in the dim light. "You have done well, Lana," he said, his voice filled with a chilling satisfaction. Lana felt a wave of nausea wash over her as she watched him handle the sacred weapon. She knew that she had unleashed something terrible, and the weight of her actions pressed down on her like a vice. The war ended in 1945, and with it came a flood of change. Takeshi, now a war-weary soldier, returned to Japan with the dagger hidden among his belongings. The country he came back to was a shadow of its former self, devastated by the ravages of conflict. But Takeshi saw opportunity in the ruins. The transition from soldier to crime lord was swift and ruthless. Takeshi used the dagger's power to carve out a place for himself in the chaotic post-war landscape. He gathered a group of like-minded men, veterans who had known nothing but violence and bloodshed, and together they formed a formidable Yakuza clan. Takeshi's rise to power was marked by a trail of blood and terror. He wielded the dagger with lethal precision, its mystical properties amplifying his already formidable presence. The clan grew in strength and influence, dominating the criminal underworld of Tokyo. Takeshi became known as the Demon of the East, his name whispered in fear and awe. The dagger, now a symbol of his authority, was always by his side. It seemed to pulse with a dark energy, feeding off the violence and chaos that surrounded him. Takeshi's reign was unchallenged, his power absolute. But the shadows of his past never left him, haunting his dreams and gnawing at his sanity. One night, as he sat alone in his opulent headquarters, Takeshi's thoughts drifted back to Lana. He remembered the look of despair in her eyes as she handed him the dagger, the way her spirit had been crushed under the weight of his cruelty. For a moment, a flicker of regret passed through him, but it was quickly extinguished by the darkness that had consumed his soul. In the Bravant, Somchai woke with a start, drenched in sweat. The vivid images of Takeshi's past lingered in his mind, a stark reminder of the horrors that had brought them to this point. Somchai knew that the journey was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but he also knew that he had no choice. The dagger held the key to his nightmares, and he had to see this through to the end. As he lay back down, trying to calm his racing heart, he couldn't shake the feeling the past was not done with him yet. The shadows of history were long and dark, and the secrets they concealed had a way of coming back to haunt those who dared to uncover them. Somchai was about to find out just how deep those shadows went, and the price he would have to pay for disturbing them. Chapter 7: Infiltration. The neon lights of Tokyo's red light district cast an eerie glow over the bustling streets. A gaudy kaleidoscope of colors illuminated the city's underbelly. Dr. Araya moved through the throng of people, her eyes sharp and focused. She had a mission to complete, and nothing would stand in her way. Dressed in a sleek, form-fitting dress that accentuated her every curve, Araya was a vision of seductive allure. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her back, and her makeup was meticulously applied to enhance her natural beauty. She knew the power of her appearance, and tonight she intended to use it to her advantage. She had been researching the Yakuza and their operations, tracing the lineage of Takeshi's empire. It led her to Kenji, Takeshi's only son, who now sat at the helm of the powerful crime syndicate. Kenji was known for his ruthlessness and his insatiable appetite for power and pleasure. Araya was betting on the latter to gain access to him. The air was thick with the scent of smoke, alcohol, and cheap perfume as Araya made her way to one of the most notorious clubs in the district. She had secured an invitation through a series of carefully orchestrated encounters with low-level gang members, each one bringing her closer to her ultimate goal. As she approached the entrance, the burly bouncers eyed her with a mixture of suspicion and admiration. Araya flashed a confident smile and handed over the invitation. They scrutinized it for a moment before nodding and stepping aside to let her pass. Inside, the club was a den of hedonism and vice. Music thumped loudly, and scantily clad dancers moved suggestively on platforms. Wealthy patrons lounged on plush sofas, their eyes glazed over with a combination of desire and intoxication. Araya navigated in the sea of bodies with practiced ease, her gaze fixed on the VIP section at the back of the club. Kenji sat in the center of the VIP area, surrounded by a cadre of bodyguards and sycophants. He was a striking figure, his sharp features and intense eyes a mirror of his father's. Kenji exuded an aura of controlled menace, his every movement calculated and precise. Araya's heart raced as she approached, the weight of her plan heavy on her mind. One of the bodyguards stepped forward to block her path, but Kenji waved him away, his curiosity piqued. "Let her through," he commanded, his voice smooth and authoritative. Araya stepped into the circle, her eyes locking onto Kenji's. She gave a slight bow, a gesture of respect that also showcased her cleavage. "Mr. Kenji, it is an honor to meet you." Kenji's lips curved into a predatory smile. "And who might you be?" "My name is Dr. Araya," she replied, her voice dripping with honey. "I have a proposition for you, one that I believe will be mutually beneficial." Kenji leaned back, studying her intently. "Go on." Araya took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I am here on behalf of a wealthy Thai businessman who is interested in acquiring a particular artifact, a traditional Thai dagger, to be precise. He is willing to pay a substantial sum for it." Kenji's eyes narrowed. "And why should I be interested in this deal?" Araya stepped closer, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper. "Because, Mr. Kenji, the sum he is willing to pay is only part of the offer. I am prepared to make this deal very personal." Kenji's gaze flickered with interest. "Personal, you say?" Araya nodded, her hand lightly brushing his arm. "Yes, I am willing to spend the night with you, to show my appreciation for your cooperation." Kenji's smile widened, a gleam of hunger in his eyes. "You are quite bold, Dr. Araya. I admire that. But how do I know this isn't some kind of trick?" Araya leaned in, her lips almost touching his ear. "You don't, but I assure you, I am very sincere in my intentions. My client is desperate to end his nightmares, and the dagger is the key. I am here to ensure he gets what he needs." Kenji considered her words, his mind racing with possibilities. The allure of the money was strong, the promise of her body was even more tempting. He reached out, his fingers trailing down her arm. "Very well, Dr. Araya. I will agree to your terms. But first, let us see if you can live up to your promises." He stood, taking her hand and leading her towards a private room. The bodyguards watched with stoic faces as the doors closed behind them. Inside, the room was opulent, with silk drapes and a king-sized bed dominating the space. Kenji wasted no time, pulling Araya into a passionate kiss. Araya responded with equal fervor, her mind focused on the goal. She let her hands roam over his body, each touch designed to heighten his desire. Kenji was a skilled lover, his movements deliberate and intense. But Araya matched him, using every ounce of her charm and seduction to keep him enthralled. Hours passed in a blur of passion and desire. When they finally lay spent on the bed, Kenji's guard was completely down. He traced a finger down her spine, his voice a lazy drawl. "You are full of surprises, Araya. I am beginning to think this deal is worth more than I initially thought." Araya smiled, her eyes dark with satisfaction. "I am glad to hear that, Kenji. But remember, the deal isn't complete until the dagger is in my client's hands." Kenji chuckled, pulling her closer. "Of course, I will make the arrangements. Tomorrow, the dagger will be delivered to your hotel. But tonight, let us not think of business." Araya nodded, though her mind was already racing with plans. She had secured the dagger, but the journey was far from over. She had to ensure its safe delivery to Somchai and use its power to rid him of his nightmares. But for now, she allowed herself to relax in Kenji's embrace, knowing that she had taken a crucial step forward in their quest. As dawn broke over the city, casting a pale light over the red light district, Araya felt a sense of grim satisfaction. She had played her part perfectly, and now it was up to fate to see their mission through to the end. The shadows of the past were closing in, but she was ready to face them, dagger in hand, and fight for the future she and Somchai so desperately needed. Chapter 8. The Exchange. The sun rose over Tokyo, casting a golden glow on the city's labyrinthine streets. The hotel room was bathed in this morning light, and in the silence, Somchai and Araya prepared for their meeting with Kenji. The air was thick with tension, and anticipation, each of them lost in their thoughts. Somchai paced back and forth, his mind racing with doubts and hopes. The promise of the dagger and the supernatural powers Araya had convinced him it possessed was his last chance at peace. The nightmares that plagued him, the visions of flesh and blood, needed to end. He couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and excitement at the prospect of what lay ahead. Araya, on the other hand, was focused and determined. She had played her cards well, securing the deal with Kenji, and now it was time to complete the exchange. She glanced at Somchai, her eyes softening momentarily. She had risked everything to get this far, and she needed him to trust her just a little longer. "Are you ready?" she asked, breaking the silence. Somchai stopped pacing and looked at her. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, trying to muster confidence in his voice. They left the hotel and made their way through the bustling streets of Tokyo. The city seemed oblivious to the dark purpose behind their journey. Somchai's anxiety grew with each step, while Araya remained composed, her mind set on the task at hand. The meeting was set at an old, nondescript building in the heart of the city. It was a place that Kenji had chosen, one that ensured privacy and security. As they approached the entrance, two men in black suits, Kenji's bodyguards, opened the door for them. "Mr. Kenji is expecting you," one of them said, gesturing for them to follow. They were led through a series of dimly lit corridors until they reached a spacious room with traditional Japanese decor. Kenji stood in the center, the dagger resting on a small, ornate table beside him. He looked up as they entered, his eyes cold and calculating. "Welcome," Kenji said, his voice smooth and controlled. "I trust you'd had no trouble finding the place." "None at all," Araya replied, her voice equally composed. "Thank you for agreeing to meet us." Kenji nodded, his gaze shifting to Somchai. "I see you've brought your client. Is he prepared for what comes next?" Somchai swallowed hard, trying to keep his nerves in check. "Yes, I am. I just want the nightmares to end." Kenji's lips curled into a faint smile. "Then let's proceed." Araya stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Somchai's arm. "The dagger you see here is no ordinary weapon. It's a relic from a barbarian era, imbued with supernatural powers. It has the ability to banish the nightmares that haunt you, to cleanse your soul." Somchai's eyes were fixed on the dagger, his desperation evident. "How do we use it?" Kenji gestured to the table. "The ritual is simple. You must hold the dagger and focus on the nightmares. Allow its power to enter your mind and confront the darkness within." Araya nodded, encouraging Somchai to step forward. "Trust me, Somchai. This will work. The dagger's power is real." Taking a deep breath, Somchai approached the table, his hands trembling. He reached out and grasped the hilt of the dagger, feeling a strange energy course through him. It was cold to the touch, yet it seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Just as he was about to lift the dagger, Araya swayed on her feet. Her vision blurred, and a wave of dizziness overtook her. "Somchai," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Somchai turned to her, concern etched on his face. "Araya, what's wrong?" Before he could react, Araya's eyes rolled back and she collapsed to the floor. Panic surged through Somchai as he knelt beside her, trying to rouse her. "Araya! Araya, wake up!" Kenji watched the scene unfold, his expression unreadable. He stepped forward, the dagger now in his hand, but as he lifted it, a dark shadow seemed to envelop him. His body stiffened, and his eyes widened in anger and terror. The room grew cold, the air thick with a palpable sense of dread. Somchai looked up, his heart pounding. He saw a transformation taking place before his eyes. Kenji's features twisted and contorted, his face taking on a sinister, almost inhuman quality. A high-pitched female voice echoed through the room, sending chills down Somchai's spine. At last, I've waited for so long, and nothing can stop me now for having my revenge on you, my lord. Somchai staggered back, horror dawning on him. Who? What are you? What are you talking about? Kenji's body, now fully possessed by the malevolent spirit, turned towards him. The dagger glowed with an eerie light, its power fully awakened. I am Chanafa, or better known as Phi-Pop, the voice hissed. And I have waited centuries for this moment. Somchai's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Raya's collapse, the dagger, the spirit, and the countless nightmares. It all made sense now, and the realization filled him with dread. The spirit continued, its voice dripping with malice. You are the reincarnation of the Prince Farnon who wronged me. And now, with this dagger, I will exact my revenge. You will suffer, just as I have suffered. And you will never find peace for eternity. Somchai backed away, his heart pounding in his chest. He glanced at Araya, still unconscious on the floor, and then back at the spirit possessing Kenji. Please, there must be another way. The spirit laughed, a cold, hollow sound. There is no other way. Your fate was sealed long ago. As the spirit raised the dagger, poised to strike, Somchai's mind raced for a solution. But before he could act, the scene before him grew darker, the room seeming to close in around him. The last thing he saw was the sinister grin on Kenji's face, now fully under the control of the vengeful spirit. The room plunged into darkness, leaving Somchai in a void of terror and despair. He could hear the spirit's voice echoing in his mind, promising a future filled with torment and suffering. And with that, the chapter ended, leaving Somchai's fate hanging in the balance, the true horror of what lay ahead only beginning to unfold. Chapter 9. The Reincarnations. The world was a different place in the era of Prince Fan. The kingdom of Siam, now known as Thailand, was a land of grand palaces, intricate traditions, and unyielding social hierarchies. The royal court was a realm of opulence and power, where the prince ruled with an iron fist and a heart of stone. Prince Fan was a man of striking presence, his regal bearing matched by his cunning mind. He was revered and feted in equal measure, known for his strategic prowess in governance and his merciless approach to those who crossed him. But behind the polished exterior lay a darker side, one that few knew of but many suffered from. One such sufferer was a young servant named Chanafa. She was a delicate beauty with wide, innocent eyes and a gentle demeanor that made her a favorite among the palace staff. But her beauty also caught the eye of Prince Fan, whose desires were as insatiable as they were cruel. Chanafa had been assigned to the prince's personal quarters, a task that was both an honor and a curse. She moved silently through the lavish rooms, attending to his needs with the grace and poise expected of her. But there was always a sense of dread that accompanied her duties, a fear of what the prince might demand next. One night, as the palace lay shrouded in silence, Prince Fan summoned Chanafa to his private chambers. She entered cautiously, her heart pounding with trepidation. The room was dimly lit, the flickering candlelight casting eerie shadows on the walls. The prince sat in a large chair, his eyes fixed on her with a predatory gleam. "Come here, Chanafa," he commanded, his voice low and authoritative. She approached him, her steps hesitant. As she neared, the prince reached out and grabbed her wrist, pulling her close. His grip was strong, and she could smell the alcohol on his breath. "Do you know why I've called you here?" he asked, his tone menacing. Jennifer shook her head, her voice trembling. "No, my lord." Prince Fan smiled, a cold, cruel smile. "I've noticed you, Jennifer. You're beautiful, far too beautiful to waste away as a mere servant." Before she could react, he pulled her onto his lap, his hands roaming over her body. Jennifer's heart raced with fear, and she struggled to free herself, but the prince's grip was unyielding. "Please, my lord," she pleaded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Let me go." But Prince Fan was deaf to her cries. He pressed his lips to her neck, his touch rough and possessive. Jennifer's struggles were futile against his strength, and soon she found herself pinned beneath him, unable to escape. The night was a blur, pain and humiliation as the prince took what he wanted, ignoring her pleas and tears. When it was over, he left her there, broken and bleeding, a cruel reminder of his power and her powerlessness. Moments passed, and Jennifer's life became a living nightmare. The prince continued to use her for his own pleasure, treating her as nothing more than a possession. But soon, the consequences of his actions became evident. Jennifer was with child. Terrified and ashamed, she tried to hide her condition, but it wasn't long before the truth came out. The palace was abuzz with gossip, and the prince was furious. He confronted Jennifer, his anger and denial mixing with a cold indifference. "You will not speak of this," he hissed, his eyes blazing with fury. "If anyone finds out, I will have you and your child killed." Jennifer's heart broke at his words, but she nodded, knowing she had no choice. The child growing inside her was both a blessing and a curse, a symbol of her suffering and the prince's cruelty. As the months went by, Jennifer did her best to stay out of sight, enduring the whispers and judgment of the other servants. She gave birth to a baby boy in secret, naming him Norong. The child was a reminder of her pain, but also a beacon of hope in her dark world. But the prince's wrath knew no bounds. When he discovered the birth, he ordered Jennifer and the child to be taken away and be devoured by animals. Jennifer's screams echoed through the palace till the very end of her life. And so, the secret of Prince Fan's cruelty was buried deep within the walls of the palace, known only to a few and spoken of by none. Centuries later, as the world plunged into the chaos of World War II, a young Japanese soldier named Takeshi found himself in the kingdom of Siam. Takeshi was a man of ambition, eager to prove himself in the war and carve out a place of power for himself. But the horrors of war had hardened his heart, and he became as ruthless as the prince whose spirit he carried within him. One fateful night, Takeshi encountered a girl before the end of war, her beauty a stark contrast to the surrounding around them. Her name was Rin, and she reminded him of Lana, though he didn't understand why. Drawn by a force he couldn't comprehend, he cornered her, his intentions clear. The assault was brutal, and as Rin lay broken and bleeding, she whispered a curse, a desperate plea to the spirits of the dead. And the spirits answered, for Phi-Pop had been watching, waiting for this moment. As Takeshi stood over, a cold wind swept through the room, and a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. Phi-Pop, the vengeful spirit, had come to witness the reincarnation of Prince Fan. "You," the spirit hissed, its voice echoing through the room. "You are the one who caused so much suffering. You will pay for your sins, in this life and for all eternity." Takeshi recoiled in fear and confused, the weight of his past lives pressing down on him. He tried to flee, but the spirit of Phi-Pop managed to mark him, ensuring that the cycle of suffering would continue, that Takeshi's soul would never find peace. When the war ended, Takeshi returned to Japan, but the horrors he had witnessed and committed haunted him. He became a powerful Yakuza leader, using his ruthlessness to build an empire of crime. But the shadow of Phi-Pop followed him, a constant reminder of his past sins. And so, the legacy of Prince Fan lived on, through the centuries and across continents. The dark secrets and unending suffering bound together by the vengeful spirit's curse. The cycle would continue, each reincarnation marked by the same cruelty and pain. Chapter 10, The Final Twist. The air in the room seemed to thicken with a palpable sense of dread. Somchai's heart pounded in his chest, his mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. He stared at Kenji, rather the twisted version of Kenji now controlled by the malevolent spirit of Phi-Pop. The once cold and calculating eyes of the Yakuza leader now glowed with an eerie, although lonely light, filled with centuries of rage and hatred. The room was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of electricity and the distant sounds of Tokyo outside. Kenji, with the dagger in his hand, looked almost regal, like a dark prince of an ancient legend. He stepped closer to Somchai, his movements slow and deliberate. "You, Somchai," the spirit's voice echoed from Kenji's lips. "The reincarnation of Prince Fan. You bear the sins from your past lives, and even in the present. Now you shall pay." Somchai's eyes widened with horror. He had heard the legends of Phi-Pop, the vengeful spirit that consumed the flesh of its victims, but he had never believed them, never thought they could be real. Now, faced with the embodiment of that legend, he felt his courage falter. "Prince Fan," Kenji continued, his voice a chilling blend of Kenji's and the spirit's. "You took what was not yours, destroyed lives, and left a trail of misery. You thought you could escape your fate through death and rebirth, but I have followed you through the ages, waiting for this moment." Somchai tried to speak, to reason with the spirit, but his throat felt dry and his words caught in his mouth. The truth was too overwhelming, the terror too great. He wanted to beg for mercy, to plead his innocence, but he knew it would be futile. "The dagger," Kenji said, lifting the blade so it caught the light, "is no ordinary weapon. It holds the power to end the lives of both the living and the dead. With it, I will ensure that you never reincarnate again. Your soul will be trapped in eternal torment." Somchai's mind raced, trying to find a way out, a means of escape. But the room felt like a prison, the walls closing in on him. He took a step back, but Kenji advanced, the dagger gleaming with a deadly promise. "Please," Somchai finally managed to croak, his voice trembling. "There must be another way. I didn't know. I didn't mean to." Kenji's laugh was cold and hollow. "It's too late for apologies, Prince Fan. Your time has come." With a swift, almost graceful motion, Kenji slashed the dagger across Somchai's throat. The blade was impossibly sharp, cutting through flesh and muscle with terrifying ease. Blood sprayed in an arc, painting the room in a macabre tableau. Somchai's hands flew to his throat, a futile attempt to stem the torrent of blood. His eyes bulged with shock and agony as he gurgled, his life slipping away. The world around him grew distant and surreal, the sounds muted, the colors fading. He collapsed to his back. The pain was too overwhelming, his vision narrowing to a tunnel. Kenji stood over him, a dark figure of vengeance. "Your sins will forever end here, my lord," he said, his voice a final, chilling benediction. "May your soul find no peace." With brutal efficiency, Kenji plunged the dagger into Somchai's stomach and sliced it open. The wound gaped wide, exposing flesh and organs. Somchai's body convulsed in its death throes, his face a mask of horror and pain. Kenji knelt, his eyes gleaming with unholy hunger. He reached into the wound and tore out a chunk of flesh, bringing it to his mouth. He bit into it with savage relish, blood smearing his lips and chin. The taste of vengeance, of centuries-old hatred, was sweet and satisfying. Araya stirred on the floor, her mind slowly clawing its way back to consciousness. She groaned softly, her head throbbing with pain. As her eyes fluttered open, she saw the horrific scene before her. Kenji, drenched in blood, crouched over Somchai's lifeless body, devouring his flesh with a feral intensity. The sight was surreal, a nightmare made real. Araya's breath caught in her throat, her mind struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. "Somchai!" she screamed, her voice trembling with shock and confusion. Kenji looked up, his eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, the spirit of Phi-Pop recognized her, and a cruel smile twisted his blood-stained lips. "Oh, Dr. Araya," he said, his voice dripping with malevolence. "Welcome to the culmination of our little drama. You've played your part well." Araya's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. The realization of what had happened, of the horror she had unwittingly unleashed, struck her like a physical blow. Tears streamed down her face as she took in the full extent of the tragedy before her. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This can't be real." Kenji stood, wiping the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. "Oh, it's very real, my dear. And now, with the dagger in my possession, I will ensure that your lover's soul is condemned to eternal torment. There will be no escape for him, no reincarnation. He will suffer forever." Araya's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, her mind not overwhelmed with grief and despair. She had believed she could save Somchai, that the dagger would bring an end to his nightmares, but instead she had delivered him into the hands of a vengeful spirit, sealing his fate in the most horrific way imaginable. The room seemed to close in on her, the walls pressing in with an unbearable weight. Araya's vision blurred with tears as she stared at Somchai's lifeless body, her heart breaking. She had failed him, and now there was nothing left but the hollow echo of her own sorrow. Kenji, now fully possessed by the spirit of Phi-Pop, turned and left the room, the dagger still in his hand. His mission of vengeance was complete, but his hunger for power and destruction was far from sated. As he disappeared into the shadows, the room fell into a deathly silence, the air thick with the stench of blood and despair. Araya remained on the floor, her body racked with sobs. The reality of what had transpired was too much to bear. She had lost everything: Somchai, her purpose, her hope, and in the darkness of that room, she knew that the nightmare was far from over. The spirit of Phi-Pop had claimed another victim, and its reign of terror would continue, leaving a trail of death and destruction in its wake. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the window, the room seemed to shudder with the weight of the horrors it had witnessed. And in that moment, Araya knew that the true terror was only just beginning. Epilogue. Tokyo's skyline was a juxtaposition of ancient tradition and modernity, bathed in the glow of neon lights and the perpetual hum of life. But beneath its bustling exterior, an insidious darkness festered, an ancient evil that now wore the faces of its victims. In the heart of the city, in a lavish penthouse overlooking the sprawling metropolis, Kenji stood by the window, his reflection a twisted mockery of the man he once was. His eyes, cold and devoid of humanity, scanned the horizon with an eerie satisfaction. Phi-Pop, the vengeful spirit, had found a new vessel, and through Kenji, its reign of terror continued. Mysterious deaths plagued Japan. Men of power and influence, those who indulged in infidelity and greed, met gruesome ends. Media spun tales of accidents and suicides, but the truth was far darker. Phi-Pop, driven by an insatiable thirst for vengeance and power, orchestrated each death with meticulous cruelty. The wealthy and corrupt fell one by one, their fate sealed by the ancient curse that now thrived in the shadows of modern society. In public, Kenji remained the charismatic leader of his Yakuza clan, a man feared and respected. Beside him always was Araya. To the world, she was his devoted wife, a picture of elegance and grace. But behind closed doors, the reality was a nightmarish torment. Araya, once a brilliant psychologist, was now a puppet in the hands of Phi-Pop. The spirit had discovered the perverse pleasure of switching between Kenji's and Araya's bodies, using her to lure more powerful and wealthy men into its web. Araya's beauty and intelligence made her the perfect bait, and she played her role with a haunting precision, seducing her targets with a blend of charm and desperation. In the depths of night, when the world slept, Araya's screams echoed through the corridors of the penthouse. Phi-Pop's cruelty knew no bounds. In Kenji's body, it reveled in her suffering, using her as a sex slave to bear children. An army of heirs destined to carry forward its legacy of darkness, ending it as a vessel for Phi-Pop to switch in between. The children, born from this twisted union, were groomed in the ways of power and ruthlessness, their souls marked by the curse that haunted their lineage. Araya's life became a cycle of seduction and suffering, a prisoner in her own body. She bore each torment with a silent resolve, her spirit broken, but her will to survive somehow intact. Each time Phi-Pop switched bodies, she felt the icy grip of its presence, a constant reminder of her captivity. As years passed, the power and wealth accumulated by Phi-Pop grew exponentially. The once hidden spirit now had an empire at its feet, a testament to its relentless pursuit of dominance. The world remained oblivious to the true nature of the curse that had woven itself into the fabric of society, feeding off the greed and infidelity of mankind. But the spirit was never satisfied. Its hunger for vengeance and control was eternal, an insatiable void that drove it to perpetuate its reign of terror. Phi-Pop's curse was a malignant force, ever-growing, ever-reaching. It used Kenji and Araya as pawns in its game, discarding and possessing them at will, their lives a testament to the cruel whims of an ancient evil. In the shadows of the penthouse, a sinister plan took shape. Phi-Pop, through Araya, continued to seduce and destroy, each victim a stepping stone to greater power. The spirit's ultimate goal was clear: to amass an empire of influence and wealth that spanned the globe, to become a puppet master in the corridors of power. And so, the curse persisted, a dark stain on the soul of humanity. The legend of Phi-Pop, once whispered in fear, now played out in the neon-lit streets of Tokyo, a chilling reminder of the ancient evil that thrived in the hearts of men. In the quiet moments, when the city was still, Araya would sometimes look out over the skyline, her eyes filled with a sorrow that spoke of lifetimes of suffering. She was a prisoner, yes, but also a witness to the relentless pursuit of power that had claimed her life. The spirit of Phi-Pop was eternal, its curse a never-ending cycle of vengeance and greed. As dawn broke over Tokyo, the first light of morning casting a pale glow on the city, the penthouse remained shrouded in darkness. Within its walls, the spirit of Phi-Pop continued its reign, an ancient evil that would never be sated, never be stopped. The curse was eternal, and so was the terror it wrought, And thus the story ended not with resolution, but with an unsettling truth that some evils are timeless and some curses can never be broken. Phi-Pop's relentless pursuit of revenge, wealth and power would continue, its dark legacy etched into the annals of history, a haunting reminder of the shadows that lurked just beyond the edge of the light. The end.
Thanks for tuning in to our podcast. If you enjoyed our exploration of ghosts, mythical creatures, and urban legends, please share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling episodes. Until next time, my beloved listeners.